Hi, I'm just going to give you a quick demo of how to access the land registry price data information. This is really useful if you're looking at buying a property or looking at what's happening with prices within your target area. The first place I'd normally start would be to go to Google and just type in land registry and type that correctly. House price data, it comes up straight away. And then you need to go to landregistry.data.gov.uk app PPD, so just click on the link there. And then it brings up the page where you can search the price paid data set. So normally I would search on a whole town. If you're in London, this doesn't quite work because London's so huge, but certainly for cities such as Bristol, Nottingham, it should be just fine. I think I'm going to go for Peterborough because I know a lot of the people in this group have been there, so we'll be familiar with the town. I'm going to leave everything ticked, so it'll bring up all the property types, all the build types and so forth. It goes back as far as the 1st of January 1995. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to also select today's date. Now the reality is it's only got the data from the last month, and it gets published up to the 28th of each month. So for example, on the 28th of March 2020, it would have published the data up to the end of February. So this is currently more up to date than the data on Rightmove. And we want all the results. We don't just want the top 100. We want to see what's happened in all of Peterborough since January 1995 right the way through till the end of February. So I'm going to click on show results. And whilst that's whirring away in the background, so you've got the circle up here, I'll just give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to see when we actually download the results. It will come into an Excel file, and I'll show you how to get that in a moment. There'll be a field which shows the transaction ID, so each sale's got an ID of its own. We'll see the date that the purchase was completed, and then we'll see the property type, which is actually outlined on this screen here. So it'll show you a D for detached, an S for semi-detached, a T for terraced, an F for a flat or masonette, and an O for other. It doesn't separate out bungalows. I guess they're just under detached. It also shows you whether it's a new build building or not a new build. Generally, I tend to select not new build just to get consistent comparables. So this is what you'll next get as the next screen. It'll normally say, we're sorry, but there's too many results to display, which is fine, because we can then click on download the data, which I'm just going to do here. And it should just take us through to another screen. So when you get through to this screen, what you want to do is you want to get all the results as a CSV with headers. So I'm going to click on that. And it's just downloading that now. So yeah, you can see it's popped up in the corner of the screen. That was nice and quick. I'm going to click on this. Here we go. And hopefully in a minute it will pop up. And I'm going to show you a couple of things in here. Firstly, how to filter the data. And then secondly, how to do an analysis using a pivot table and a pivot chart, so you can see what's going on for your target property category and also for the whole town here. So what I'm going to do, just to make this a bit easier to read, is if I left click on the arrow symbol between the A and the 1, and then I'll get a vertical bar if I hover over here. If I double click on that, yeah, it's expanded it all out. So here's that unique ID that I just mentioned. We've got the price paid, so I'm going to highlight that column and make it a bit easier to read by clicking comma style and getting rid of the decimal places. I think it's only got the data to the closest pound anyway. Then we've got the date, we've got the postcode. That's a property type that I mentioned just before, whether it's new build or not, whether it's freehold or leasehold. And then generally you've got the primary, primary address object name. It's normally like the house number. You've got the street, locality is quite often empty, and then the town, and so forth. So one thing you could do, if you go into data and then click filter, if there's a particular street you're interested in, so for example, just before pulling out this data, I had a quick look on Rightmove, and they had a featured property at the top in Monument Street. It is a 3-bedroom terraced house, and they had it on there for £165,000. Now I don't know anything about Peterborough, but what I can do is I can go into here and look at the street data. I can pull up Monument by typing it in here. Like that. I don't want Monument Court, don't know where that is, but I do want Monument Street. And then I can go across to here and say, well, actually, in the last year, what transactions went through in that street. So I can see there's a few in here. But interestingly, one of those is a detached house. So in this house, there's a terraced house that I saw. So I can take that out. Now, I've only got 3 price paid points there, but the average of those is just under 136,000. And yet these guys have got their house on the market for 165. So I'm already thinking that looks a bit toppy compared to what prices are sold at recently. And you can do this for any street in the UK. Just download the data and it's all there. So that's just an example of something you could do. Now, if you want to watch the market more generally, we can do some more analysis with this. So I'm just going to clear that on here. I'm going to add a column next to my postcode. So I'm going to highlight that column. I'm going to right click and go insert. I'm going to call this postcode first 4. And you'll see why in a minute. Right, stretch that out. And then if I type in here equals left, and then an open bracket, and I point at cell D2 and type in a comma and 4 and a close bracket and hit enter. What it's given me is the first 4 characters of the postcode. Now, somewhere like Peterborough, where it doesn't go into double digits on the number, it's less important. But if you're somewhere like Cardiff, you might want to pull out CF, say 25 rather than CF2. And then it's good to get the first 4 digits. Otherwise, you can just pick up the first 3 if you're in a smaller town. So that's a useful piece to pull out to start off with. You can see there's a green square in the corner, and I'm just going to double click on that, and that'll copy that formula right the way down. And this is quite a big data set. If I press Control and down, you see we've got there's 123,000 rows there, and Control and up takes me back up to the top. Now, if I want to break out the date into the year and the month, I can do something similar. I can go to the column next to it and just go insert, and I'll do the same again, insert another column. And in here I can put the year, and then in here I can put the month, and then in here I can put equals year, and then pull open bracket, point to the date next to it. Oh, don't need a comma this time, and then a close bracket. And then let's just reformat that. So if I right click on that and go to format cells, and then go to number, and then I don't want any decimal places. And then if I go to month, I can put equals month, and open bracket, again click back on that date, close bracket, and enter. Now I want to, if I go to home, I can copy the format from the year to the month. That just gives me a number there. So this was a transaction that took place in June, so it's giving me the number 6 for the month of June. And if I left click on both of those, I get the green square, double click on that, and that'll copy that right the way down. That'll take a few seconds because it's quite a big spreadsheet. Now, if I then go into insert and go pivot table, you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute, and go OK. So what we can then do is we can then have a look at that data. So I think in the row, you see over here on the right hand side, I've got my pivot table fields, and then it's got a 2x2 grid. So I'm going to pull the year into the rows, and some of the other details I'm going to pull into the filters. So I'm going to pull the month into there, and we'll see why in a minute. I've got postcode first 4, we'll pull that in as well. We've got property type, I can pull that in as well. Whether it's a new build or not, I might want to have a look at that. And then the estate type, I might want to have a look at that as well. And then in the values piece, what I'd normally look at is I'd look at the price paid, and if I drag that into there, again with the left click of the mouse button, I don't really want the sum, I don't want the total what's been paid. If I left click on my mouse and go value field settings, I can go average, and I can see the average of what's been paid. That's more interesting. And if I drag in the price paid again, let me just put that on top of there, and again if I click on the arrow next to it and go value field settings, I can get a count of what's been paid. So what that'll give me is how many transactions have gone through, so the count of price paid, and then the average of the price paid as well. Now if I highlight these 2 columns on here and right click, I can go format cells, and again I'll just go number. I don't want any decimal places. Do want the thousand separator. There you go. That's just so just redone that for me. Now that'll give me a table showing me how many transactions have gone through over the years, and what the average price paid is, and that's for all of Peterborough. And we'll do some bits and pieces with that in a minute. Now clearly for 2020, we're only 2 months in at the moment. We've only got January and February, so I'm not really comparing apples with apples when I look back at 2019. But if I wanted to look at just January and February, I can go into the month, and I can go select multiple items, untick everything, and then just click on 1 and 2 to give me just the January and February. And if we scroll back down, what we can see is actually year on year, the numbers for January and February of properties sold. There's only 324 properties that have been sold compared to 691 for the same 2 months last year. In fact, we have to go back to really 2010 to get a number that's or 2009 to get a number that's lower than the than 2020. So that says a lot in itself already. Remember, this is before coronavirus really started, so what we're seeing is that the volume of transactions is actually down across 2020 before all of the lockdown and everything kicked off. So if we wanted to see it graphically, and I think this is more useful for a lot of people rather than a table of numbers, still clicked on that table. If I go to pivot chart at the top, it should give me a little graph picture. If you click on combo at the bottom, what we've then got on here is we've got the counter price paid, which we've got as a column. Now you can't see it because the number of paid is, or count of the price paid rather, is very low compared to the price. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tick on here and get a secondary axis. And now what we've got on the left hand side is the number of properties sold in each year across January and February compared to the average of the price paid. And then if I click on OK, in fact I can get rid of this now. And then here we can see actually what the market looks like across the piece. This is linked to the table on the left, and the drop downs here. So this is all of Peterborough for January and February. Again, I could just look at it across all of the year rather than just January and February. Of course, we've got the very low volumes there for January, February. What's really nice about this, though, is you can then go in and see for a particular part of the market. So, for example, if you're just focused on the centre of your town, and say, if your strategy is just to purchase in P1, I'm sure it won't be, but if it is, you could just go into here and see what the average price is doing, and you can then be a bit more specific about it as well. You might just be interested in terraced houses, for example. So I can just select terraced houses by selecting the T in the property type. I might want to pull out everything that's not a new build, so click yes to get rid of the new build stuff. And then here we can see really what's going on now. We can see that actually the volume sold of houses, used to be, sort of about 371 a year or 376, and then in 2008, in the last crash, it dropped down to 180. It's never really recovered volume-wise to where it's at before, and actually, the prices continue to rise. One thing you can do, if you right-click on the price line, you can add a trend line, and it'll come up with a linear regression line. You can change the type of trend if you're interested, but generally you can then see where, compared to the trend, and I always think the trend is your friend, you can see where the prices were above the average trend line and below average. So it's always interesting to see whether the current prices are below or above average on the trend. And again, if we go back into the month, we can then have a look at just January and February if we wanted to see if that looks any different, because prices can vary throughout the year. And you can see actually obviously the volumes change because we just got 2 months there. It's quite a useful tool, I think, this. If you wanted to as well, you can actually then go into, for example, there's 14 terraced houses that have been sold in P1 this year. If I click on here, I can double click on that and it'll bring up a list of them for me. You've got all the prices paid here, so you've got that average price in there. It gives you the addresses, so you've got all the details there. If you're benchmarking for a potential property purchase this year, you can download the data for your own market, for your own town that you're focused on. You can slice and dice it to pull out freehold, leasehold, terrace, flats, detached, semi-detached, whatever your focus is. And then also, if there's individual streets you're interested in, you can go in and have a look at the individual streets yourself and pull out some comparatives in there. I hope you found that useful. Let me know if you've got any questions.